Hello, I'm Luna, an astrologer and tarot reader of over 8 years. Today we're going to be taking a look at Selena Gomez's birth chart to get an idea of her future spouse. Now that she is newly engaged, we can actually take a look at the birth chart and what the birth chart said about why she took so long to find somebody who she wanted to settle down with, why there was delayed marriage. All those kinds of things are evident in the birth chart, and what her birth chart says about the kind of man that she was ultimately going to marry, right? So if you would like your own personal reading, you can head on over to my store. The link is in the description below. I offer all kinds of readings: future spouse readings, synastry readings, career readings, love readings, even just a full birth chart reading. You can just, when you click on the reading, tell me what you would like your special focus to be on, and then add your questions. So there is currently a 25% off on the store for this upcoming eclipse season, so book that before it's gone. So let's take a look at what is going on in her chart. In the inner circle, we have her birth chart, and then on the outer circle in green, we have the transits. So looking at her birth chart, the most important placements to look at when we're looking at a future spouse is the seventh house ruler, Jupiter for women when it comes to the husband, and Venus just in general, to see what themes she was going to encounter in love in her life. So in her birth chart, she has the seventh house in Aquarius. Having the seventh house in Aquarius is often a marker for either marrying an older man or marrying someone when you're a bit older. And that's just because Aquarius is traditionally ruled by Saturn. And typically when you have, for women, Aquarius or Capricorn in the seventh house, you're going to gravitate towards either older men, or even with my clients, I've noticed that some of them get married really young and like have children really fast. Like, there is a big push for maturity when you have the seventh house in Aquarius or in or in Capricorn. There is a tendency to either to grow up significantly because of marriage. So sometimes I've seen it go from like somebody who gets married at like 19, 20 and then has like 4 kids by the time they're 26, or somebody who even could get married like at 22 and marries like a man who's like 10 years older than her. And then there's obviously the classic, Saturn influences can just delay marriage into your 30s, right? Or even 40s. So the way that manifests depends on the rest of the chart and how things are being influenced. But for example, Blake Lively, is another Leo rising. And for her, it manifested a lot more like marrying young to an older man and having a lot of children, in her 20s, right? So she was kind of behaving in an older, more mature place than people her age, because of marriage, right? And for Selena, obviously that's delayed marriage for some time for her. And she did, I think, Benny is a little older than her. She did end up marrying a man who was of a different generation. So seventh house in Aquarius also indicates that her future spouse was someone who was going to teach her a lot. Somebody who was going to be zany and different from her. Aquarius brings someone with funny qualities, like somebody who's really funny, somebody who's really smart, somebody who's like almost like your best friend. Like, there is a very easygoing, you're my best friend, I really get along with you kind of vibe when it comes to Aquarius in the seventh house. It also brings a sense of like being with somebody who brings, like, sometimes people might be like, what an interesting pair. Or when she is with her husband, she becomes a lot more fun and cool and different, and she tries a lot of new things. Aquarius in the seventh house also indicates that her husband could be someone who was a longtime friend, someone who started off as a friend, or someone who was like in her network for a while, like a friend of a friend, or just someone who's like been immersed in her social circle in some capacity. Her 7th house ruler is Saturn. So we have Saturn in the 7th house. So this is a double marker for an older partner or for delays in marriage. Her Saturn being retrograde indicates that a lot of the lessons and trials and tribulations that she would face in her marriage or in her road leading to marriage and meeting her spouse were definitely going to be more in the realm of delays and karmic lessons as opposed to meeting a husband early in life. And that's because there's just so many indicators of Saturnian influence on top of Saturnian influence. So once you start seeing kind of a motif, like something is repeating over and over in the chart, it indicates that that's very likely to manifest in a very particular way. Her 7th house ruler being an Aquarius again indicates that her future spouse is going to be someone who is quite different from her and maybe someone she wouldn't have initially really connected with younger in life. And that is another theme that can come along with Saturn aspects to Jupiter, like the spouse, or Saturn in the 7th house, because there is a need to grow up a little bit in order to start to see your rightful partner for who they are, because Saturn indicates learning through trial and experience. And so that indicates that in order for her to recognize her spouse, she had to go through a little bit of finding the wrong ones first. Saturn retrograde also indicates at times that there could be multiple marriages or multiple failed relationships early in life. We also have Saturn opposing her Venus. So this is the 3rd Saturnian influence. So, when my clients come to me and they're like, I haven't found love, like what's going on? A lot of times it's like, especially when it's like this is going to bring a lot of trials and tribulations to love and relationships, because Saturn rules her 7th house, which is the karmic planet. Saturn is in the 7th house, which is karma, specifically relating through, long-term partners. And then Saturn opposes her Venus, which again indicates that a lot of her themes of maturity and growth in her life are coming directly through karmic partners and long-term relationships that really challenge her to think outside the box and even to face self-esteem issues when we're dealing with Saturn opposing the ascendant and Venus. This is like a lack of self-love or needing to learn how to love oneself, and that seemingly only coming through time, because Saturn is the time lord in astrology. He governs time, so it's kind of like it's not quicksand, what is it, like an hourglass. When we're dealing with Saturn, we're dealing with the hourglass and karmic timing and justice. And her 7th house is in a T-square. So her Saturn squares her Pluto, and it opposes her Venus and her Mercury. So again, there's just a lot of conflict in her chart coming through marriage and relationships, which means that she was going to really face a lot of conflicts in her relationships. It also means that even in her marriage with Benny, it might not be a conventional marriage. When we're dealing with Aquarian influences and even these squares to Pluto in the 4th house, this indicates a lot of her childhood trauma is playing out through her relationships, and she may swing from extreme to extreme, trying not to repeat the same patterns as her family, but ironically going in the severe extreme other direction of it. Her Pluto being retrograde also indicates that her relationships can leave her feeling powerless, a lot of times feeling like things are happening to her, and she might not recognize her own hand in a lot of these unfortunate events. When it comes to her marriage life, with Saturn square Pluto, she needs to anticipate that her marriage is not going to be traditional. It's going to break a lot of traditional rules. I do know that she talked about not being able to have children. That might just be one of the many ways that her marriage might differ from what is traditionally associated with marriage. But Saturn in Aquarius, in and of itself, can bring about like themes of breaking traditions. And even her best friend, what is her name? Taylor Swift. She has Saturn in Aquarius, Saturn in Capricorn, but it's conjunct Uranus. So she also has, a tendency to kind of break traditions and norms when it comes to dating and like what a young woman should be like and what marriage should look like, right, for a woman. And so with Saturn squaring her Pluto as well, there's just a lot of themes here about having to understand that she's going to be breaking patterns in her family through doing things in unconventional and different ways, and that her spouse themselves is going to bring a lot of this eccentricity. So I did just do a Benny and Selena synastry reading where I talked a lot about their dynamic, and I do think that Benny is really a good partner for her in terms of something like marriage. Like, marriage is often a little bit karmic because it's something ruled by Saturn, right? So marriage is ruled by Saturn. It is a binding commitment, a legal commitment. And a lot of times the person that you choose has a lot more to do with your karmic lessons. And I do think that he is somebody who is really capable of learning how to go with the ups and downs of Selena's life, right? With Saturn square to Pluto, she was going to attract a long-term partner who was quite resilient and capable of being with her through thick and thin, and adapting the relationship, even if it is unconventional, in order to fit their lives. And I do think that Benny really makes sense in that capacity. Her Jupiter, which is her spouse significator, it rules and represents the spouse for a woman. Jupiter is in Virgo, and this indicates that her spouse is going to be someone who is really, really smart, someone who's really good with words or writing, someone who's quite technical. It's something that they do. They could be like specialized in a particular craft. Jupiter in the second house indicates a wealthy partner who makes a lot of money from kind of a niche, a niche skill. A lot of times when we're dealing with Virgo, we could be dealing with working with our hands, working with writing, working with just kind of even composing. Like he's a producer. Those are very Virgo things, music theory, kind of just even playing instruments and being quite technical and having a little bit of that like almost savant energy, being really good at like a very, very specific thing. Jupiter in Virgo also indicates a very, very humble spouse, a spouse who might not be, especially with Aquarius and Virgo, intellect is really highlighted. Even comedy is really highlighted. Virgo's ruled by Mercury, and Aquarius has a lot to do with like connecting to people through culture and through sharing of ideas. So definitely a spouse who is going to be a jokester, someone really funny, someone who can get along with anyone. Jupiter in Virgo also indicates that this could be someone who wears glasses, or someone who's a little small, or someone who might be overlooked in a room. Especially with Aquarius, someone who maybe people think is a bit of a mismatch or strange. Comes along with the territory. Her Jupiter trines her Neptune-Uranus conjunction. So again, a spouse who really brings a lot of whimsy and excitement to her life. But it's still in the 6th house. So the 6th house, Neptune-Uranus conjunction, trine to her Jupiter in Virgo. These are all service-oriented signs. So it indicates a spouse who's really service-oriented, a spouse who shows love through doing things for her, even through speaking well of her, and being detail-oriented, someone who remembers the things she likes and the things she doesn't like, and learns her quirks and learns her ups and downs, especially with Neptune and Uranus in the 6th house, which is the house of daily life. It can mean that Selena has very particular needs when it comes to her daily life, or a very strange way of living that he seems to kind of just adapt to and accommodate. We also have her Venus here in Leo. It indicates that she really is looking for someone who makes her feel like a queen, someone who puts her first, someone who gives her a lot of attention and dotes on her heavily, because she is a little insecure. There's like a constant need for validation. With Venus here, I do know that her Venus is conjunct Chiron. It's not depicted on this particular chart. I forgot to add it. But it just indicates that she was going to experience quite a bit of wounding in love, especially opposing Saturn. Lots of experiences in love that would make relying on love and a partner for self-esteem very difficult for her. A big part of her karmic lessons in marriage and in partnership are that a lot of her self-esteem issues came from seeking the attention of others to gain her self-esteem. And Saturn was really trying to teach her a really big lesson around her authenticity with Saturn in Aquarius, and finding partners that really work with and encourage her weirdness and her feelings that she's a little strange or doesn't quite fit in, or doesn't really feel totally confident. Finding a partner who naturally clicks with her energy, as opposed to feeling like she's constantly performing for a partner, which is one of the shadow sides of Venus and Leo, especially conjunct Chiron. It also indicates that, again, Venus is conjunct Chiron, this is going to bring quite a few heartbreaks or delays in marriage. And her Venus is also conjunct Mercury retrograde, which means that she's bringing some bad judgment when it comes to her love life experiences. The Mercury retrograde opposition to her natal Saturn indicates that, again, her future spouse is going to be someone that she misjudged early on, or someone that she already knew from the past, even if just in passing. The Mercury retrograde also indicates that this person is someone that she once had a very negative or just very different perspective on, that then maybe she had a 180-degree shift on her opinion of them. It also means that her future spouse is someone who was going to help her to see the world differently and see herself differently, and call her out when she was being really harsh with herself, or maybe even performing or people-pleasing for others. One of the things about Saturn in Aquarius, and even that Jupiter in Virgo, is that it has very low tolerance for BS. So her spouse is going to be someone who really called her out when she was performing or not being herself, or kind of just trying to almost posture herself. And it does seem like her future spouse is someone with, Jupiter and Virgo, someone who really encourages her to lean on them, and her future spouse is going to make her feel like she could be okay with needing someone. But also Jupiter in Virgo is very perceptive. Virgo is a very perceptive sign, and it's very astute. And even Saturn in Aquarius is very good at identifying like the hidden quirks in other people. And so it does seem like her spouse is going to be someone who saw her and recognized qualities in her that other people seem to overlook, qualities in her that she might have even felt were embarrassing, right, with her Saturn opposing Venus. Her future spouse is going to be someone who loved the parts of her that she was insecure about or afraid about, or felt like she had to be a certain way. What's interesting about a Saturn opposition to Venus as well is one of the big criticisms about her spouse, her and Benny, is that he's not conventionally attractive. And what's really interesting about that is that in and of itself, I do think is a big part of Selena's karmic journey as well. Not to say that she has to settle, but rather that it does seem like with Venus and Leo, a lot of the people that she would pick and the kinds of relationships that she would choose weren't just her seeking validation from her respective partner, but also a seeking of validation from those around her based on who she's with. So she, with Venus on the ascendant, this is someone who does see love as a reflection of her own identity. So it's interesting, that she became famous for being Justin Bieber's girlfriend. Of course, she's really famous on her own right, but being Justin Bieber's girlfriend became a really big part of her identity and like her public image. And one of the things with Saturn in Aquarius that's opposing her Venus, it's really teaching her about the difference between like being with someone because it works and because it benefits you and because you feel like a queen, as opposed to being with someone because it makes you look good and you feel like, having won them or being with them makes you feel like you're successful, which I do think that the entire Justin Bieber and Hailey Bieber thing really triggered this particular wound around not being chosen, not being the girl that Justin Bieber chose, or things like that. Even though I do believe that Selena was the one to often reject Justin, again, because, Venus and Leo, she's someone who really aspires to be treated with a certain level of attention, and she seeks a lot of like that obsessive, like, look at me and really admire me, and it does feel like Justin would often make her insecure, maybe say backhanded comments to her, and I do think that kind of shaped her Venus Chiron on the ascendant thing, where it's like feeling a little insecure and hyperfixating on what her partners thought of her. It does feel like being with Benny, with a man who maybe other people didn't immediately understand her being with someone who she wanted to defend being with, not because, they're toxic, but because he's a good man and he treats her well, even if other people don't see the value in that. That's a really big theme of like a Venus opposition to Saturn, especially on the ascendant, when it comes to like beauty and how one is perceived, and in the sign of Leo, which can often be kind of performative. I do feel like, learning how to overcome other people's opinions and basing her validation and her success and her quality as a woman on the kind of man that she chose, or like what other people thought of that man or what that man thought of her, is a very big part of her karmic lessons in love, right? And even Jupiter in Virgo, the 7th house in Aquarius, ruled by Saturn in the 7th house. Even if you were to use the modern ruler, Uranus, conjunct Neptune in the 6th house. This indicates a partner who is zany, eccentric, whimsical, someone who's imaginative, and who is primarily a best friend, a confidant, someone she can lean on, someone who's dependable, and someone who indulges the parts of her that maybe other people don't quite get or understand, which is a big part of Aquarius, is like feeling misunderstood and finding someone who understands you easily. So, she ended up getting married right after her Saturn return. So Saturn entered Pisces, and shortly after she announced her relationship with Benny, and then she announced her engagement. So whatever karmic lessons she was learning really peaked during her Saturn return, and then once she kind of got through that, she finally found her partner. Also, what's interesting is that we're going through the eclipses, the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in Virgo, and Benny's a Pisces, and so like he's going through his nodal return as well at this time. So there are significant like transits in both of their charts, indicating that they're entering a really monumental life stage. The other thing that's going on is that Jupiter has just entered Selena's sign. She's a sun in Cancer, which is an incredible time for like feeling abundant and feeling like you're really living your best life. And in the next few months, like by the middle of next year, I'm not sure when she's getting married, but I wouldn't be surprised if she gets married middle to late 2026, because Jupiter is going to be in Leo. Maybe she's going to be in her honeymoon, or like maybe she's just going to have her ceremony at that time, or maybe it comes out that she's gotten married in secret. But Jupiter in Leo is going to be aspecting her Venus, which is like textbook. Venus-Jupiter stuff is like textbook engagement, anniversary, like big celebration, which is something that Taylor Swift just had. She had a Venus-Jupiter conjunction in her 7th house during her Jupiter return, and boom, she gets engaged. So if you're looking for like timing for engagement or things like that, Venus-Jupiter transits, whether it's Venus on your natal Jupiter, Jupiter on your natal Venus, a Venus-Jupiter conjunction, like on top of a very significant love placement for you, whether it's your descendant or your 7th house ruler or your vertex, these are all like pretty significant indicators of like some sort of significant celebration around love coming up, a big joy, something to be excited and happy about coming up. So that is all I have for Selena's husband. Let me know what you guys thought, and I'll see you guys in the next one.